And then the Imam says, the desire for women, this obviously works reciprocally, which is the greatest of all desires, who would deny that, is susceptible to excess, defect, and equilibrium. Excess obtains when the intellect is overcome, so that a man's concern is so distracted towards the enjoyment of women and slave girls that he is unable to tread the path of the akhirah. Or it may overcome a man's religion so that he is drawn into obscene activities. This may become so extreme in some cases that two foul habits are acquired. Firstly, he may partake of something which makes him desire to have intercourse more often, just as some people take certain drugs which strengthen the stomach and allow them to eat more of the things which they desire. So aphrodisiacs are rather like these new dieting drugs, if you like, the same kind of mentality. Maximize the pleasure, minimize the pain. And he says this resembles nothing so much as a man tormented by savage beasts and snakes which sleep from time to time, but which he finds methods of awakening and arousing and then has to make his peace with. But the desires for food and intercourse are in reality pains which a man would rather be free of so as to gain another form of delight. It's a rather austere image, one valid perspective. This doesn't mean that aphrodisiacs and the like are forbidden. Clearly there are certain people with medical conditions who can legitimately make use of these, and traditional Islamic medicine, even a Tibb al-Nabawi, is filled with remedies of this kind. But going to excess in this, as with anything, is reprehensible. As he goes on to state here, the second thing is that in the case of some misguided people, this desire may end in what he calls ishq, or amorous passion, which means a kind of obsession or an addiction. This constitutes utter ignorance of the intended purpose of sexual congress and a descent to a level lower than that of the animals. This is what we would call nowadays sex addiction, and there's a huge industry in this country and in Britain and elsewhere of people who are in recovery, getting away from this particular addiction. There are Sex Addicts Anonymous clinics and organizations, and it's apparently a major problem. And it's exactly what the Imam is talking about. And he says, how do you avoid this addiction? And he says, well, stop it before it begins. Don't let the escalation take place. He says it's the disease of an empty and unconcerned heart. If you're busy with serious things, then you won't fall prey to this. One should be on one's guard against its preliminaries by abstaining from repeated glances and thoughts. Otherwise it will take firm hold of one and be difficult to shake off. In this, it's no different from the passion which certain people harbour for wealth, status, land and children, or even for playing with birds, lutes, backgammon or chess, all of which may possess them to such a degree that their religious and worldly lives are adulterated and they are unable ever to abstain from them. In this age of computer games and chat groups, this is particularly evident. There are apparently people who have died of starvation because they can't tear themselves away from their computer screen. This happens, and as the technology becomes yet more sophisticated and other senses are wired into the system, this will become more and more common. People living worlds of virtual reality, the great majority of which is aberrant obscenity, which is a blasphemy against Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, taking something beautiful, turning it into something obscene. So he says, don't begin down that path if you don't like its consequences. To break the power of this amorous passion, this extravagance, in its early stages is like pulling at the reins of a riding beast when it heads for a gate it would like to enter. To rein it back is a very easy thing, whereas to treat such a passion after it has taken hold of one is like letting the beast go in and then catching it by its tail and pulling it from behind. A much more difficult task. One should therefore take precautions at the onset of these things, for later they can only be treated with an effort so intense as almost to lead to death. So he then says, excess in the matter of sexual desire then causes the intellect to be overcome to this degree which is very much to be condemned. Insufficient sexual desire, however, leads to an indifference to the opposite sex, or to giving them insufficient pleasure, which is also to be condemned. It's not frequently noted, but Islam explicitly discovered the female orgasm in Zal, which is mentioned in the hadith narrated in Musnad al-Firdaus by Imam Daylami. It's a weak hadith, but nonetheless it indicates that some early Muslims were aware of this principle and regarded it as a legitimate one. And the tahseen of the spouse, which clearly, logically entails this, is something which is an obligation of the husband. Sexual desire is a praiseworthy thing when it stands in a state of equilibrium, obedient to the intellect and the sharia in all its movements. So it's a praiseworthy thing when it's in the state of balance. Whenever it becomes excessive, it should be broken with hunger and with marriage. Then he gives the hadith. Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam said, Ya ma'ashar al-shabab, O young men, you should marry, and whoever cannot should fast, for fasting is a form of castration. It's the true meaning of this word, wija. So that's his initial statement, and he makes some very large absolute statements here. He says this is a good. It is a good that is linked to one of the goods of the akhirah, and hence should never be despised or belittled or mocked by the mu'min. It is a good which was lived by the Rasul alayhi salatu wasalam and by the pure ones of this ummah. It is a good which leads to the greater numbers of this ummah in the world, which will be a source of the pride of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam on Yawm al-Qiyamah. تَنَاكَحُوا تَكَاثَرُوا فَإِنِّي مُبَاهٍ بِكَثْرَتِكُمُ الْأُمَمَ يَوْمَ الْقِيَامَةِ. Marry each other, he says, and become numerous, multiply, for I shall be proud of your numbers on the Yawm al-Qiyamah. So it's a good thing on both of these counts, ukhrawi and dunyawi if you like. But when abused, like any good thing, it can take us down to the level of the asfala safilin, the pathetic spectacle of the solitary internet surfer, or of those who actualize their foul distortions and put into practice their fantasies.